Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WatchHaus. My name is Shy Guy. You might be wondering to yourself, hey, where's Thibble? Where's Goopy? Where's Katrina? No, we don't need any of those people. The inmates are running the asylum here tonight. And speaking of the inmates, I am joined this evening by Zach and Ethan, two other writers at the Game Haus. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing all right.
Can't complain.
Well, who could complain when we've got so much to talk about here tonight? So let's jump right into it on this, the 30th episode of WatchHaus. That's right.
Ooh.
Crazy that we've made it this far. Yeah, I would have had like one of those party hats. I wish I had one that I could wear right now, pop off some streamers. But I didn't come prepared here tonight. And that's why I'm just the one in charge of leading the show, exactly as it should be. The blind leading the blind. But before we get into things, let's do as we always do here on WatchHaus and reset our watches. Remind everybody what we've been up to the past week or so. Anything we want to talk about. This is your time to shine. So let's start with you, Zach.
Just recaps. Luckily got myself an off week this upcoming week. Hopefully going to get a fun piece out. Still working on exactly what that's going to be, but got to do recap last week. Doing D&D stream on the Game Haus Twitch on Tuesdays with our producer Rob and some other good fine folks. Putting some videos out on YouTube under the name Do the Thing Theater. Good time there. And it's Earth Day, so let's go Earth.
Woo.
All right, Ethan, what's been up with you?
I've also been writing recaps. This coming week, I have only one match because my main team is not playing, but my backup team is. So I'll have that. I'll try to come up with some good ideas for articles in the meantime. I've also started recording the voiceovers for our YouTube versions of the recaps that go up. So if you listen in for that, you might hear me on a couple of the games. I think I did one day this past weekend and one day 2 or 3 weeks ago. So yeah, starting to do that, helping out. I think that's interacting with people on Twitter. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. I'm kind of in the same boat as far as recaps go. I too have an off week next week, which is just going to be so nice. Neither of my teams playing. Don't have to worry about writing the recaps at least, but outside of that, always keeping busy. This is not the only Game Haus podcast that I will appear on. Also got Reign Over Me, the Atlanta Reign podcast I do in North Cheto. We've had a lot to talk about. It's been a really eventful stage for Atlanta, and things only got crazier this week. So I cannot wait for that episode, especially after last week. On the show, he predicted that Atlanta was going to upset New York, and I gave him shit for it on Twitter, and now that's going to come back to bite me, so I'm really looking forward to that. But speaking of the Atlanta Reign, they had a really crazy weekend with both of their games. And in that vein, we're going to break down some of the most notable games of the entire week. And I think that's as good a place as any to start. So, Zach, I think you had this one on your list, the game against NYXL. What the heck did we just watch? What's that?
I have no words to explain what happened, other than it happened. We didn't think that we'd see a bigger upset than Seoul over NYXL when we did in the stage playoffs, but New York, not wanting to settle for that, wanted to again show that they were the team to be upset and lost to Atlanta. So I couldn't have predicted this in a million years. It wasn't going to happen, but then it did. My other game of the week, I gotta give it up to the Spark and the Charge. It was the only game this week that went to a map 5.
It's true. We did have kind of a stumpy week. It was still pretty entertaining across the board. But yeah, the only one game going to a map 5 is pretty rare.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of like parity in the league this year in terms of just not knowing what the heck is going to happen. But last week was, outside of those few games, just a little bit more by the books than some of the others we've had so far. I'll ask you this when it comes to that Atlanta New York game. Do you see this as just a fluke where, New York is still going to remain a dominant team for the rest of the season, or does this actually really say something about either one of these teams? Is Atlanta way better than we thought? Is New York not quite the same team that they were in season 1?
I will preface this by saying I think that one of the draws of Overwatch League is that most of the time, like, upsets can happen, and the team that you think is going to win might not. Like, you might get a real good fight out of someone one day, and another day, and a team might just be tired. I don't think this is the downfall of NYXL. I think this is the highly competitive nature of the Overwatch League. I think New York underestimated Atlanta, and just kind of turned off a little bit, just having a sleepy week. They're like, oh, we'll just breeze through this, get ready for our next game. And I don't see it happening again for New York, at least on this caliber. But I definitely don't think that New York should be counted out.
Mm-hmm. I don't think they necessarily have anything to really be worried about, like, long term. Unless they make a habit of this kind of thing. It doesn't, in my mind, really tell us a whole lot about either team, because Atlanta, in what was my game of the week, turns around and has one of the most entertaining games you will ever see of Overwatch, just in terms of like fireworks, in terms of the scoring, in terms of improbable and weird stuff happening. But kind of a rough rough loss for Atlanta after the high of beating New York. They go down to the Guangzhou Charge, and we have our Guangzhou rider here in Ethan. So tell us a little bit more about that game.
Well, my heart basically was going at about 20 miles per hour for about 45 minutes there during both of the, what was it, the Paris, was it Paris or?
Guangzhou.
Or, no, I mean the second map.
It was Hanamura. It was
Hanamura. Thank you. On Hanamura and then Kings Row, both of them were just so insane. Atlanta definitely had the edge on Hanamura, but Kings Row really could have been anyone's game that entire point. I think that it was very cool to see the Charge come online this week. As you said, the game versus Hongzhou also was very close. We got to see Eileen's Doomfist for the first time in that game.
He went off.
He did, and they won every map that he played Doomfist on except for map 5. So, and then in this match, again, they played a lot of the Doomfist. They also ran like a couple other little wonky strats every now and then. Like they had 3 different defenses on Hanamura. Each time they had like a slightly different one. They started with the bunker, and then they went Winston 3-3 and then Ryan 3-3. It was just seeing them starting to find their own niche is very cool for me, kind of watching them this far and them kind of playing goats, not really being the best at it, and now they're adding in the Doomfist with it. So it really caught Hongzhou off guard, and then it even caught Atlanta off guard a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, they almost did a similar thing in Stage 1 when they took Vancouver to the wire really early on. That was kind of their initial coming out party. They've been slow to start in Stage 2, but if they can find their footing, they are definitely going to be among the most entertaining teams to watch in the league. No matter what the end results are, there's just so much like talent and so much unique ability on that team that they are always gonna be fun to watch. So I'm very excited to see them progress.
And the casters have been saying this for a while. They had a really bad schedule this stage particular. Stage 3, I was looking ahead. I think that'll be their easiest stage. So I think if we see Guangzhou play well, that'll be the stage that they really pop off during.
Yeah, starting back-to-back stages with first 2 games against Vancouver and then 2 games against Shock in Stage 2 is just brutal.
Gladiators twice, yeah.
I mean, that kind of leads us as a really good segue into our next topic, which has been something that has come up a lot, I think, over the past few weeks. If you follow the competitive Overwatch subreddit, there have been threads about it. People have been talking about the schedule and the effect that it has on the league this year, especially in comparison to last year, where we still have the 4-stage structure, but for the most part, every team played every team each stage. So the stage standings seemed like they were a good barometer of how well each team was performing during that stage. Now, that might not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. You've got some teams that have such difficult stages. Like Chengdu has like such an easy stage in this stage 2. They have I forget what it is, but their strength of schedule is just so much less than everyone else's. And you've got other teams that have like front-loaded or back-loaded games. NYXL has already played, I think, 6 games. Houston's played 3. That happened in stage 1 with the same thing, with New York having played 6 games by the time it opened up, before I think Hangzhou even played like their 3rd game. It's just so inconsistent, and you've got a lot of back-to-back matches. Specifically, I know Guangzhou because I've been covering them. They played the Shock back-to-back. They're going to play the Dragons back-to-back. And all of these back-to-back matches usually just end up with the team that wins the first one does even better in the second one and crushes that team even better because they kind of figured out the strategies. So I feel like that's a little bit of a inconsistency with the overall league.
For sure. I mean, it's not the only thing that has people kind of upset. The number of times you play each team like twice in the same stage. There's also just been a lot of talk about the imbalances of stage records when it comes to making the stage playoffs in the first place. Your entire fate, if you are kind of one of those middle of the pack teams, can really be determined by who do you play and when do you play them.
Yeah, I mean, I think during stage 1, it wasn't really a problem. We saw a lot of teams on that kind of like balancing on that line of, are we going to be 3-4? Are we going to be 4-3? Are we going to make the playoffs? And I think that led to something super interesting in that final day, kind of depending on who won, who lost, by how many maps. We got to see an interesting playoff picture build. I think this stage is a lot less interesting, especially because you look at some of the undefeated teams right now and look at their strength of schedule. Like for the Gladiators, their hardest opponent is either Seoul first week or their last game of the stage, which is going to be against Boston. You look at New York, their hardest games were Philadelphia, they've played twice, and apparently Atlanta.
Didn't expect that, but yeah.
Yeah, San Francisco played their hardest ones, Philly and the Spark. You can maybe throw Toronto in there. They're towards the bottom of the pack right now. And then the Titans that play Spark, Seoul, and Boston. So it's kind of the same kind of teams are popping up as the like, okay, like these are the, maybe they'll challenge them in stage 2. But a lot of these teams have played the bottom of the pack teams, like the Mayhem, like the Valiant, like unfortunately to say it, the Charge. And it's frustrating to see because we're seeing just such a big gap in those, and just you can really see it in this stage. But who knows? Like everyone is going to complain about the schedule at some point. There's going to be runs where teams are going against the top 3 in the league, or there's going to be times where another team's going against the bottom 3 teams in the league. It's extremely difficult to make a schedule for a league, especially when you're upgrading it by 8 teams to 20, and you're going to have 7 in a stage for whatever reason, numbers and all that jazz. They're doing their best. I think this is going to be one of those situations for the Overwatch League that they'll learn from, like Season 1, Stage 1 playoffs, where London played how many maps in
15,
one day?
I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Or maybe they'll switch things up, like how when New York lost to Seoul in the stage finals, then Seoul had to play the Titans because of the reseeding. A lot of people didn't like that. I think that the Overwatch League has shown that when something doesn't go right in the way that they've set things up, they have the ability to grow and change. And so I expect Season 3 to look a lot different schedule-wise.
Okay, so in that vein, let me throw something at you guys, and this is what, at least in my mind, I see as kind of the ideal schedule for the Overwatch League. And the main problem that I see is that we've got these 4 stages and these 3 stage playoffs after the first 3, and it's unclear to me, what those are supposed to mean. How much kind of importance we are supposed to be putting on these stage playoffs, because the schedule imbalances make it so that the teams that wind up in the stage playoffs are not necessarily going to be reflective of the top 8 teams. So the way that I would fix that is get rid of the 4 stages. Playing 7 games in kind of a section of the season is not enough to get any kind of a real idea of where teams should shake out. I would cut it down to 2 stages in a season. Do it much more like League of Legends does it with their splits, where you play, you can double the number of games, so you can still keep the same number of games that we've got right now. I think the overall schedule looks completely fine, but if we cut it down to 2 stages, we then only have 1 mid-season tournament, and that one becomes instantly incredibly meaningful. It is the only other chance that these teams are ever going to have to compete for like a trophy or a title outside of stage playoffs. And I think it would work really well, like you see some things in like European soccer, where they will have mid-season cups, and they're actually meaningful. The teams are playing for a trophy, they're playing for pride, and having 3 of those throughout the season, I think, kind of dilutes it and just exacerbates all the schedule problems that we're already having.
Yeah, and this was supposed to kind of help lessen burnout, but I mean, as we saw from stage 1, there was so much burnout, so many players retiring, even some coaches having to like retire or swap off of teams. So clearly this isn't really helping the desired outcome.
Yeah, I think something needs to change there. Exactly what that might be is going to be interesting to see. But Zach, I think you were definitely right talking about they've been willing to change things up. So if they find that this isn't kind of what they want out of the league, then I have no doubt in my mind that next season could look completely different, especially when you factor in geolocation.
Oh, I think especially with the geolocation, you're going to have to change something up. Like, you're not going to be able to have teams running multiple games a week, especially like if you've got London, who's got to go all the way to China, or you've got California all the way up to New York. Like, these are some big gaps that we're trying to fill because we're a global league, and so they're going to have to figure something out pretty drastically.
And all of that transportation time means less scrim time, means all sorts of they can't keep up this play style. I think they might end up stretching the league out even longer, but even so, it's already been stretched out much more than last year.
I honestly think a longer season might not be the worst idea. I think, especially to combat some of this burnout, like, you don't need to be playing multiple games in a week. Like, especially like you think about some of these teams who, like you talked about New York, who have already played 6 games in 3 weeks. That's a lot, and a lot to prepare for. And especially if you're going to throw travel times on top of that, like, it's not feasible. And so I think, give them some time, stretch the season out, maybe make some of the breaks like between, if they keep the stage model, maybe make some of those breaks, like give them a 2-3 week break. Like, it happens. Like, you look again towards European soccer, which is something I'm more familiar with as well. Like, you get that Christmas break, and that's so nice before you open up with January and all the fixtures in there, especially with a ton of different league cups and such. So I don't expect the 4-stage sort of thing, especially with as many like stage playoffs, if they keep stage playoffs at all. But I think they definitely, like, because I mean, we're running from mid-February to what are we on to? July?
So August.
This year it's August.
Okay, so like, that's
just the regulars. The playoffs into September, maybe even October. Like, this is going to be a pretty long season at the end of the day.
Yeah. And then there's the World Cup to balance that out with. So we're not entirely sure what's going to happen with that, if I'm correct, because that started in August, I believe, of last year. So
yeah, there's no way we see it in the same form as we got last year. They're probably not going to be doing the great group stages in the same way, which is going to be unfortunate because you lose some of those incredible crowds. Like the Paris group stage was so incredible. But in that same vein, for the first time in the history of the Overwatch League. Next week we are going to have the Dallas homestand, so teams are going to get to see their team, or fans are going to get to see their team play live in front of them in their home city for the first time, and that's really interesting. So I'm curious, just overall, like what are your thoughts, or what do you think about the homestand weekends as we are rapidly approaching one of them?
I think it's great. I think it's the perfect opportunity before you introduce a lot of this geolocation stuff to kind of gauge how you think crowds are. I think especially, like, I know I am not anywhere close to Los Angeles. I don't know if there's a time during this season that I'll be able to get out to Los Angeles to watch a game. And so for people, it's like most of the country, it's closer than flying to LA. And so I think it's a really good opportunity to see how some of the venues are going to handle a different crowd like this. And I think it'll also be interesting to see the amount of fans and the way that fans come and support, especially before we see it in Season 3.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I like the ideas of the homestand weekends. The last one's a little bit weird because it's like the Valiant's homestand, so
it's still in LA.
In LA. So you're not really going to get much difference there. And I was just checking. Neither of the LA teams are playing at either the Dallas or the Atlanta homestand. Oh. So you're not going to get an instance where the LA team the LA crowd is in the minority because they're not going to be there.
Well, Valiant is playing this weekend.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
you're
Valiant
right.
is in Dallas.
I forgot about that. So that'll be interesting, I guess. You're right.
They'll get to see what it's like to not have everyone cheer for you.
Yeah.
I mean, hey,
this
advantage is really really something.
It is, and it'll be very cool to see other teams kind of have that. I'm a little worried about the geolocation next year because this is definitely setting up for it, and I think you're going from 3 homestand weekends into maybe 20
every weekend.
I think that's going to be a big transition. I also keep thinking in the back of my head, how is Florida going to make it work when they represent an entire state, not a city? Where are they going to play? But yeah, overall, I think the homestands are very cool. I'm a little worried about the geolocation, but that's kind of an issue for the future. And if the Overwatch League believes they can do it, then we'll have faith in them.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. I mean, we still have no idea really exactly how that's going to work. They say it's coming in full next year. They say this is going to be the time for it to happen, but they still haven't told us how they're going to make it happen. And it's a very big leap from what they're doing now to full geolocation. So I think
it's too big of a leap. Honestly.
I think it probably is. I tend to agree.
Yeah. They've also prevented any new teams from being able to come in. They've said so themselves. So while we might get a more balanced league if they had like maybe 24 teams or something like that, you could divide it into 3 stages. That way, we're not going to see any change in the number of teams, most likely.
No.
Yeah, which sucks. Yeah. I mean, I think that there are some really big gaps. You look at the entirety of the Midwest, being originally from Chicago and heading back there soon. I'd love to see a team in Chicago in one of the biggest cities. Yeah, in one of the biggest cities in the world. You've got places like Berlin who have specific esports arenas that it would be big in.
You've only got one in the entirety of South Korea. Like, you could assume that Busan might have their own team. And, although we have so many Korean players, 2 teams from Korea would create such an interesting dichotomy between them. It'd be so great.
It'd be like 2 LA teams.
Yeah.
I think they should have waited until Season 4 to do this. I think that testing it out heavier in Season 3 would have been the way to go. What you could do is maybe have a few, instead of every game in LA, maybe have a few of the home stands that have proven that they can do it. Like, say Dallas pulls this off really well. If they were to do like a certain number in Stage 3 or Season 3, you could have like LA, Dallas, New York, maybe one in Europe, and play those more often to see how like a few cities are able to handle multiple teams at once. So.
And I've always thought that something in that vein might still be in the cards. I am really skeptical that we're going to get full geolocation, that every game is going to be a home and away game in some arena around the world. Like, it's just so different from what we've got right now. I'm not sure that they can really make it happen, because a lot of these teams, there's no way that they have all the venues and the arenas in place right now.
I've only heard about like 2 or 3 teams that, besides the homestand weekends now, that have even begun creating arenas. Philly has. I actually think I just read that Guangzhou was starting to plan one. But other than that, we haven't heard anything from any of these teams creating their venues.
Right. And with Philly, they've said that theirs isn't going to be ready until what Season 4 would be.
Right.
Like their new building isn't going to be ready for Season 3. So you got to think, where are they going to go? Where are some of the teams, like you said, Florida? Like it would maybe be easier to split it into some regions, have the 4 Chinese teams and maybe Seoul Dynasty share an arena for a season. Have the East Coast, have the West Coast, have the South have one, have the European teams share one. Like there are ways to do it. I think that would especially help Florida fans who are not sure where their team is going to be that represents all of Florida. Let's just stick them in Atlanta for a little bit while we're waiting on some of these other teams to get their esports arenas ready.
Yeah, I definitely think something like that could be a good kind of middle ground between what it seems like they're trying to do and what we've got now. But let's get back into the games a little bit, or at least what was happening on the servers last week. So we are now nearly halfway through our season here, and we've got a fair amount of data on these teams. Like I think we are getting to the point where we're starting to see teams really start to shake out and figure out, who are the elite teams in the league, and the stratification of the league as a whole. So I want to talk kind of generally here. And we don't have to name every team for this, but I'm wondering just how you guys are seeing the league shake out in terms of like the different tiers of teams right now. Let's start with you, Zach.
I think that I have kind of 2 different rankings. I would say that in this stage currently, there are 3 groups, and that would be the top 4 or 5 teams. The top 5 teams right now in this stage are all undefeated. You've got the bottom 5 teams, and then you have everyone else fighting it out in the middle. When it comes more to the actual league itself, I would say I'd break that into a top 4, probably like a 5 through 12, maybe 13, and then everything below that in a tier as well.
Okay. So for me, I kind of break it down into like 4 groups largely, in the sense that I think there are 4 teams now that I think have kind of really separated themselves from the pack, and that's obviously New York, Vancouver, San Francisco have shown that, and then I think the Gladiators have fought their way into that tier at this point. I'm hesitant to put them here just yet right now because of that slow start. But if you look at this team, like since Decay has joined the lineup, they have rightfully been an elite team in that time span.
He's insane. He's absolutely insane.
Yeah, he's a disgusting mechanical player, and obviously a huge building block for them going forward. So I am ready to put them in that top 4, ready to put them in that tier. But I could be convinced otherwise. Right below that, I think you've got the teams that I would consider good teams. And that probably goes down to around 10, 11, maybe 12 in terms of, if you think about this in power rankings or standings. And there's a lot of teams in that tier. The kind of lowest for me in that group of teams is probably Boston. They are kind of the cutoff point for me in terms of, are you a good or a bad team right now? And then below that, you've got the teams I would consider the bad teams, about 5 or 6 of them, and then finally the bottom 3 that are just like miserable and at this point I think kind of hopeless in terms of making something out of the season. When you're talking about Houston, Washington, Florida specifically, and Valiant, if you want to throw them in there. I still have a little bit of hope that they are turning it around a little bit, but I still think it might be too late after an 0-7 start.
Yeah.
No, Ethan. So what do you, or how do you see this shaking out right now?
So I liked Zach's idea about like the stage 2 versus like the entire league so far. With stage 2, I really agree that there's the top 5 teams, which is obviously New York, even despite that slip up, they're still up there. San Francisco, Gladiators, Vancouver, and then London, because they're all just doing so well and they don't play each other. And then you've kind of got like this divide where you've got like a bunch of teams that are right now at 0 or 1 wins, and you kind of get the middle. For the overall league, though, I honestly want to say I see like the top 3, possibly just even the top 2, and then everyone else, because I feel like there might be a bit of a gap between New York Gladiators and everyone below it, but I also now do kind of think there's a gap between San Fran and Vancouver and New York and Gladiators, because Gladiators have been looking insane, but they also kind of keep dropping maps to really low teams. They dropped a map almost 2 to Florida. They dropped a map to Chengdu. And then you've got New York kind of on this like tear where they look like they're insane, but then they kind of slip up and they lose to Atlanta. They lost to Seoul. They drop maps to, in weird ways, to like Washington of all teams. So you've got like those. And I really think that San Francisco, despite having 3 losses, is really at almost the same echelon as Vancouver at this point. And a rematch between them, I think, would be way closer than people are assuming. And then there's just really the rest. I think it's going to shift up throughout the season, depending on the stage, when everyone's like got tougher stages or easier stages. But so I think depending on what time of the league we're talking about, it's going to be different. But that Vancouver and San Francisco are still going to be at the top, and New York and Gladiators are going to be close behind that. So
I would agree with you there, especially you look at what we've got this stage. San Francisco have not lost a map. They have a plus 20. And in defense of the Gladiators, I will say that most of their map losses have been, as much as it pains me to say, when they sub Surefour in.
yeah.
As fun as it is to watch him, and as near and dear to my heart as he is, and as important as I think he will be for the future of this team come stage 3, stage 4, they're kind of just putting him in right now to make sure that he still plays, so that everyone can say, hey, look, we still have Surefour, even though they lose that most of the time, if not all the time. There might be 1 or 2 where they've won.
Unless they're playing on Paris, it hasn't exactly been the best look for them. For yeah, I think that is definitely fair what you were talking about, Ethan. I kind of agree with you in terms of, Vancouver and San Francisco are looking a cut above everybody else right now, especially for this stage. I really think that's the case. I'm going to be disappointed on some level if we don't get that rematch in the Stage 2 finals. I really think that is where we are headed at this point. Although, now there's going to be a lot more competition for seeding in terms of, where they wind up playing each other. But we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But it seems like that's the heading. They seem to have kind of figured things out faster than most of the other teams. They had a really tough start to the season, San Francisco, in terms of their strength of schedule, losing to New York and Vancouver before they seemed to kind of level up once we got to playoffs. And now they are looking like they could potentially be the best team in the league. We will still, I think that title is going to stay with Vancouver until something changes it, but they are right there with them.
I think the only way San Francisco would win is if Vancouver kind of doesn't really take them seriously, and I think Vancouver could do that, but just knowing Vancouver. But San Francisco are here to kind of show that they are not to be underestimated, and by integrating Violet, they've just been on a rampage ever since then, and Rascal with Baptiste, just...
Yeah, they're the only team that really seems to be using Baptiste to a really high level in really incorporating him into their game plans, and that's very cool to see someone be kind of an early adopter and making it work right now.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree that I've said it. If I've said it once, I've said it before. I didn't think San Francisco were the real deal, and when we started this season, and on every single turn, they have proven me otherwise. I think that they, as much as I don't want to see it, I kind of want to see it, a Vancouver San Francisco rematch in these stage finals. But I think honestly the more interesting part will be the road there, because the Gladiators have already clinched their position after not getting it last stage. London's going to be in there and still undefeated. It's
Probably
looking like
New
Shanghai.
York.
Yeah, probably. Like New York has lost a game, so they don't have that undefeated status anymore. So they're going to be a lower seed, and you've got teams like Shanghai looking like they're going to get in this stage playoffs as well. And so I think the games leading up to the final might be some of the more interesting Overwatch that we'll see this stage.
For sure. Especially since they've kind of all managed to avoid each other during this stage. None of them seem to play each other. And it's been kind of excruciating to see them, watch each other from afar.
Everyone plays Valiant.
But I don't think, the good thing about that is that I don't think we're going to have the same kind of stage playoffs that we did last time, because for as great as that final was, and potentially, like, people have said maybe the best game of Overwatch ever played, the lead up to that was terrible. Vancouver and San Francisco 4-0'd everyone they played in playoffs. It wasn't exactly the most entertaining road to the finals, and I don't think we'll see that this time. There's a lot more competition at the top of the league, I think, and that could be really explosive to watch when we get to playoffs.
My one fear is just that in later stages, is it just going to be the same thing all over again? Because even in a more DPS heavy meta, I've seen the way that Vancouver and the Shock play like 2-2-2 strats. They're still just as good. Is it going to just end up being Vancouver versus the Shock in almost every stage playoff? And then in that sense, kind of what's the appeal of those, just besides seeing those two teams facing off again?
I'll take as much of that matchup as I can get. It was just inject it straight into my veins. But I understand the sentiment there. Here's a quick reminder for everyone watching that San Francisco still has a stage or a season 1 MVP candidate on their bench who hasn't played at all this season, pretty much. Striker is still sitting there just waiting to be unleashed at some point. And God help us all if that happens, if we get into a meta that requires Tracer and Widowmaker some more, then that team gets perhaps even scarier. But let's turn our attention to next week. We already touched on the Dallas homestand and its kind of implications for the league as a whole. But let's look at some of the games that we have got on the docket for next week. What kind of jumps out to you, Ethan, in terms of what games really catch your eye? Which ones are you looking forward to in Dallas?
I'm definitely looking forward to Houston versus Dallas, even if it is kind of pretty one-sided towards Dallas in terms of favorability right now. Dallas is still they lost a couple of games that people weren't really expecting. And I mean, Houston, when they play Linkser, when they play Bonnie even, they do well. If they run these like more DPS heavy strats, I don't know if we're going to see that because of other I still think, if not for anything else than for the crowd, I think that is going to be the most intense match that we are going to see there. There's going to be screaming galore, might be even louder than the Battle for LA, because you got Dallas fans there now. I think it's just going to be insane. It's going to be a joy to watch, regardless of the outcome. I think it's just going to be so much fun.
Yeah, you're going to have one thing to mention is that you're going to have a ton more people there for this game. This is a much larger venue than the Blizzard Arena when we're talking about just the sheer number of fans. So the noise level that we could reach in a game like that, where basically everybody in the stadium is cheering for one team or the other,
and they're Texans.
They're Texans. There's Dallas versus Houston is a rivalry that is like pre-made. It goes back way before Overwatch League, and people will appreciate that. I think it's going to mean something to these fans. In my mind, outside of the Battle for LA, this has been the defining rivalry of the Overwatch League so far, and this is going to be the only chance these two teams get to play each other. They're in opposite divisions now, so only one matchup per season. So
And that's kind of sad.
It
I
is.
wish I could see it more.
Because the banter back and forth between these teams last year, the games themselves were always a highlight, especially for me back when I was a Houston fan. Those were so fun to watch. Hey, I've got my Titans to comfort me now. I
feel less bad for you.
Your 15 win streak is holding you now.
Yeah, exactly. They can dry my ante up tears. But Zach, what do you think are some of the other interesting games that we've got on the schedule next week?
I have both Chengdu games. I think the Hunters versus the Spark is going to be very, very, very interesting. We're going to get to see a lot of DPS out of that, especially if they put Crystal in on the Spark side. It's going to be a good game. I think it could go either way as well. And I just think that I'm definitely going to have to check in for that one. And then the Hunters versus the Spitfire. I think London should be able to take that 3-1, 4-0. But any game that the Hunters play is an interesting game. And it'll be interesting to see if London kind of match some of the compositions that they have been throwing at them, or if they're able to adapt, because I know that London have been doing a lot better job of adapting to other teams' strategies. So it'll be good to see Prophet and Birdring be able to play some of those DPS heroes again that we saw when they beat Philly in the grand finals last year, and just all throughout the season that we saw Prophet and Birdring continue to pop off.
For sure. And, not for London because they've already gotten out to their part, but those are really important games in terms of if we're talking about stage playoffs for all the teams involved. Spark and Chengdu could really, really use 2-0 or at the worst 1-1 weeks in Dallas if they want to keep their hopes alive of making stage playoffs. A 2-0 week for either of them would go so far. It would almost guarantee them a shot at the stage playoffs. So they're both really going to want that. And one other really interesting wrinkle for me when it comes to that Chengdu versus Hangzhou game is you've got potentially the two most kind of hyped, maybe most talented Chinese players in the world in Gushui and Crystal going up against the Chinese team, the one team that is kind of repping for Chinese Overwatch hardcore. And to see that little mini matchup, I think is going to be really juicy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, I think that is about going to do it for us here tonight. It's been a good show so far, but we got one last chance to, for everyone here to plug what they're doing, Twitter, anything you've got. Now is the time to shill unabashedly for yourself.
I mean, my only thing is follow me on Twitter. I think I'm pretty fun times, and read all of the recaps that we put out. We put a lot of work into them. We try to make sure we get every game covered, and we've been doing a pretty good job of that. So just continue to read those recaps in case you miss games, or even if you just want a review of what happened in those games and seeing someone else listen to it on YouTube, because I'm doing that. But yeah, just keep supporting us.
Do the thing, Feeder, YouTube, Twitch, follow it. Good time. D&D stream tomorrow is at 8 Eastern. Immediately following that is the inaugural episode of House Queens, which is all the female members of the Game Haus getting together, talking some Overwatch from their perspectives. Super interesting. I am very excited to watch it right after the D&D stream. You could definitely catch me in the comments there because it's gonna be great.
Absolutely. I cannot wait for that one. I got to take the opportunity to plug my own podcast, Rain Over Me. If you care at all about the Atlanta this week, you probably should. They had quite a banger of a week this week. And so we will have a ton to talk about, me and Norchetto, this week, and tune in for that one. Other than that, I don't have to write my recaps this week, so I'm going to have a couple of analysis pieces coming out later in the next few days. I think I'm going to take like a deep dive into how Atlanta managed to pull off that upset against New York and really get to dive into the nitty gritty of that one. So I am looking forward to writing that, and hopefully you will check that out. But that is going to be it for us here tonight at WatchHaus. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here this evening. It has been a pleasure bringing you this episode. Thank you both, Zach and Ethan, for joining me, making our inaugural run without the kitty wheels on. No of the original hosts in attendance, so I think we managed to not set the house on fire. They might let us do it again.
Episode 30, turning point.
Yeah. We got this.
Yeah, we did it. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and then have a great night.